All right, let's get straight into the story about the concussion, gentlemen, because we've all been around football a long time. We've all been around courts and reporting for a long time as well. And I get the feeling this is going to end up there. First of all, today, a new class action came out of Adelaide. Greg Griffin, who has been prolific in football for about 40 years in all sorts of areas, very close contact in the old days with Peter Jess, who's also involved in these actions. Jarman Smith tucked some of the biggest names in the game. And then you'll see also that your old teammate, Max Rook, has led to an original class action as well. We'll get to that in a moment. You spoke to the lawyer in charge of that. Just as we look at this, Michelle Margalit will get to her in a few moments' time. Jimmy, you were there. You were part of this team. You were there. You had the same doctors. You played in the same games. Max clearly believes he's got a case, but what's your recollection of the time?
Yeah, look, it's difficult for me to read, and obviously your first concern is Max as a teammate. You know, I spent many hours training. We played in premierships together, and you hope his health is in a great position. So that's first and foremost. But clearly, he's had a different lived football experience than I have. Lloydie, there's ex-teammates of yours, part of some of these class action claims. I had multiple concussions in my time at Geelong, but I had nothing but good experiences with the doctors. I never felt I was put out there under risk. I felt fully healthy, ready to go. So it's a bit hard to read that someone who you spent so much time with has had a completely different experience.
Were you ever sent out when you thought maybe I shouldn't have?
No, not at all. I think first and foremost, the doctors that I was involved in, and even the strength and conditioning staff, and then on the top of that, the coaches. So it was almost 3 stages before we got to the coaching staff who made the decision on whether you played or not. I never felt like they put my health at risk.
Damien, you spoke to the lawyers in charge of this today, Michelle Margalit. What's your sense of all this?
Well, there's 2 separate class actions now, and the Margalit claims added about 12 or 13 players today after it was revealed yesterday. And look, take a listen, Ned. I started this interview with asking Michelle how footballers are going to prove that the injuries that they are claiming are football-related.
So what we need to show is that on the balance of probabilities, there's a causal connection, and we will be looking at footage from games, medical records and other documentary evidence to really make that causal connection.
Michelle, anyone who would play AFL would concede, I think deep down, that there is a danger component to it. How does that line up with this particular case?
Look, I think this idea of assuming risk is really complicated. What we can see from the medical evidence is in 2002, the AFL's own doctor was saying that there's not compelling evidence of ongoing cognitive issues from concussion.
And what do you seek in an ideal world for each person involved in this claim?
Certainly we seek adequate compensation so that these players can, care for themselves and their families, that they can pay for medical treatment because they're cut out of the workers' compensation system. In addition to that, what's really important to Max and to our firm is that there's change, that now the AFL will properly look at how to improve protocols and research around concussion and to accept the independent opinions of qualified specialists in this area.
The AFL had its own statement today, Ed, regarding this, and just an interesting point toward the bottom of it. In regard to the recent PR release from a law firm on a potential class action featuring Max Rook, the AFL has seen the media reports of the firm's comments over several weeks, but as of 3 p.m. today, the AFL still had not been served with the claim. That extensive statement there on screen.
Interesting, they've gone for a big PR firm too. Simon Bristol, who was the former editor of the Herald Sun, is running the PR on this particular case. I can tell you as well, in the last 24 hours, the AFL have been working on this for a number of years, in fact, but maybe they've been a bit slow to get this to the press, to be perfectly honest. But the bottom line is they've come up with a goodwill, no-fault compensation. It is basically a workers' compensation for brain injury for footballers that they're looking at. Peter Gordon has been working on this, and Peter, who normally works on the other side of class actions, has been in this. He's looking at it from a pastoral care side of things as well as a litigation point of view. They've interviewed some 100 past players. We'll get to you in a second, Lloydie. We've heard from one tonight already, and they've made the recommendations to the AFL and the AFLPA. And what we might see is actually something like an ombudsman, a trustee, to be involved in this to see whether some players need to have ongoing help financially. Maybe not a lump sum, might not be the best thing for them. Lawyers like a lump sum. There might be a lump sum, might be a combination of all of the above, and also some pastoral and medical care going on. So no one in football, and I think this is one thing that I would like to see, everyone just calm down a little bit. No one in football wants to see anyone getting hurt, and I do resent at times when football clubs and or the AFL are maligned and made look like they don't care about anyone involved. I think that's unfair. Now we have to find the right position, and don't forget doctors and people involved in football use the best available information at a particular time. Things change and move on. Lloydie, do you ever get knocked out and play on?
Yeah, I wanted to show one. I reckon a couple of times there's a full forward there, you get punched in the back of the head, and you're seeing stars, and you played on through that time. But this was in a final, 2002. We actually won this game, but this was a very, very serious one for me where I can't remember coming to till I was in the ambulance. I was vomiting blood for a few days, which is the reaction of obviously your brain's been had so much trauma that you're vomiting blood for a long period of time. So, as Jimmy just touched on, that's the late and great Dr. Bruce Reid and Ian Reynolds, who are always there to support me. And the welfare for me, Damo, was just number one. Football was secondary. They wouldn't have even let me play the second week. So just in the Margaret claims, it said players who have never been able to hold down a job since playing AFL, their personal lives have been shattered. If I was the AFL, I'd want to go through each case with a fine-tooth comb, because it's a really tricky one, because a lot of these players don't help themselves once they finish playing football.
It's going to be interesting, because don't forget that the AFL have drug tested every player basically for the last 20 years, and this might come up in evidence. There are other issues as well. I mean, I think there's a duty of care for a lot of managers, because over the journey there have been some people sold to football clubs who have come in with hidden problems so they get another contract and haven't been able to go on. So I think there's a lot of people involved in this. This is not to take any blame away from anyone or a certain blame to anybody. This is just, we've got to look at this as the whole community, and most importantly we have to get the message through to junior football to give the kids a break. If they've had a head injury, just give them months off if they need to. Go to the doctors and get things. The old days of John Kennedy used to say any injury above the shoulder doesn't count. Well, it certainly does now.
Well, how do they decide who's eligible then, Ed, for this pastoral care? Because if you spent 2 years on an AFL list and mightn't have played a game, but then you went and played, say, 8 years in the WAFL, the SANFL, and suffered a concussion there, but are you eligible for the AFL fund?
Well, it's going to be interesting, because we know that the tragic situation with Shane Tuck, who took his life, but in between his football career, now there was no, I'm led to believe there's no knockout in his career, but everyone considers now repetitive head impacts as being the equivalent of a knockout. So no one's saying didn't take. We know the way Shane played, and he went hard and he was in there burrowing in. But he had a boxing career afterwards as well, and he had a major knockout in that fight. So again, your point's valid, and I think that's going to be one of the great impasses. At the same time, I'm led to believe that a number of doctors are now looking at taking legal action. Once, as soon as they're actually into these things, their insurance comes into play, so insurance lawyers are going to get themselves right into this as well. But a few doctors, I believe, are very hurt, disappointed, disgruntled, and are looking at their legal position in this on some of the allegations. So here we go. It's going to be horrible.
Yeah, the integrity of the doctors, unbelievable. The doctors at AFL, they treat players like their own children, so yeah, it would hurt some of them.